Happy Monday. It's Monday. We're live today with none other than a good buddy of ours here, James from Black Project. How's it going, James?
Hi, good.
And I think we're live with Milk the Funk too today. So if you're catching it live, you can type in questions and Milk the Funk, and I'll be monitoring them. You will hear the beeps because I don't know how to turn that off. And I will read your questions to James so you can. I'm very good at reading. So, James.
There's only one question so far, so it's going to be a short show, I guess.
Yeah, this is a 2-minute combo. So, and if you want, so yeah, the link is right here on Milk the Funk, and I also tweeted it just in case. But if you're watching this late, it doesn't matter where it's at because you missed it. So. Anyways, that's the predicament we find ourselves in. So, how's it going, buddy? I know you're going on a trip tomorrow.
Yeah, going well. It's been a little crazy running around all day today, but yeah, it's good. Here we are. So.
So we had a chance to speak a little bit, and I'm. When was it? I think I heard March, I think, of this year at Food for Thought, and so we had a little bit of a maybe a 20-minute conversation there, and. You guys have one of these breweries that you can ask questions all day long about what's going on over there. I think you're running one of the more exciting breweries. They what?
Nobody knows.
We're gonna try and figure some stuff out now. So, yeah, where does that come from? Can we just skip the timeline? What is the nobody? You did something with some of your fans in March also. It's this shroud of secrecy around what's going on at Black Project. What's that all about?
Yeah, I mean, so our name, a lot of people, I won't say a lot of people. Some people have been confused about what our name is, or they don't understand it, which is fine. But the name Black Project is sort of an allusion to government black projects. It's not really an allusion. It's literally named after government black projects. So that's the idea. And government black projects are black things, black budget items are essentially things that Congress votes on and says, yeah, we're going to give the military usually or like the CIA money for this program, but we don't know anything about it at all, and the public sure doesn't know anything about it. So it's just a way of, it's just kind of like shady stuff going on in the government. Our brewery was kind of started that way because we were operating in the back of our other and sort of scraping by, and a lot of people who worked for us didn't even know what we were doing. So it was sort of, people were like, "Well, is this a secret going on?" I was like, "Well, I just didn't tell you because I thought it might suck." But then when it was good, they were like, "Why didn't you tell us you were doing this stuff?" So we kind of, that's sort of part of the name, and we have like a membership program and whatnot, and we just take that sort of like spy versus spy and redacted type thing and try and just use that a little bit in how we communicate with people. It's kind of fun. So
you have a fan, like a membership club too?
Yeah, they're called agents.
Agents.
Yeah.
Things all tying together. So you're talking about your former project, it's Future Former.
Former Future.
Huh? Former Future, I mean.
Former Future, yeah. It gets confusing, especially because it's former project and is. But yeah, I mean, that was it was a clean brewery in Denver. Same exact location. Black Project started out of the back of that, basically. And just this past August, or I guess coming up on a year ago now, we switched over from doing just bottle releases for Black Project to doing the actual tasting room being Black Project stuff also. So yeah, that was kind of an easy decision. I mean, we like making those beers, but there's a lot of tap rooms in Denver making a lot of similar beers, and there's nobody doing spontaneous fermentation at any large level, and so it made sense to kind of do what we're known for, and we were becoming more and more known for Black Project, and we were only doing Black Project essentially one day a month when we released bottles. So we were like, why are we doing this? We expanded a bit, and that gave us enough capacity to be able to put it on tap.
So what were, I guess, when was the final transition from full-time transition to Black Project? I mean, it hasn't been.
I think it was August 12th or something like that, 2016.
Yeah, there hasn't been. I mean, I was going to say it hasn't been that long where it was just finally we're just doing Black Project.
Right, and for a while before that, we were kind of dipping our toe in the water. We'd have a Black Project beer on tap pretty much all the time. And yeah, that was kind of just the transition. At a certain point, it's kind of tough because you have to stop making the other beers. And so it was like managing how we're going to have beer on tap and like phase out one type of beer and phase in the other type was a little difficult, honestly. Like, you know, we definitely had times where we're like, we don't have enough beer right now. That's still kind of a thing we face, but I think people at least understand like these beers take a long time. So if they're not ready, we may go down to 4 beers on tap or 3 beers on tap even for a few days.
Sure.
But it was kind of like, well, do we make another batch of our clean IPA or do we make another batch of our porter? Because at some point we're not going to sell it anymore and we want to just do Black Project. And it was like, how long do we keep doing this for? So
you guys. I got to try an IPA last time. And you were using a 4 yeast to ferment your IPA, right?
Yeah, that's actually a Black Project beer. So that one is because it's a wild yeast strain, we call that a Black Project beer. We've done a few different versions of that type of beer, like a New England style IPA, different hops, slightly different grain bills, but always the same yeast strain, which I harvested from across the street from my house, which actually this summer my neighbor cut down. So I noticed that one day I got home from work and I was like, oh, cool. That's where our yeast came from. It's gone now. So
you got lucky when you grabbed it.
I guess, yeah, that was actually years ago. I was before opening any brewery, I was just home brewing, and this would have been early 2012 or something like that. I was just home brewing, and I was into the idea of collecting wild yeast and making sour beers and spontaneous fermentation. It's a little harder to do on a home level, but I knew I could isolate strains, and so I did. and actually, at Sarah and I's wedding in 2012, we had a saison made with a sister strain to the one we used to make our IPA at Black Project. So same piece of apple, but different colony.
Very cool. It's like you talked about home brewing in 2012. I guess is that what got you into professional brewing, or is it something else that kind of led you down the path where you're at now?
Yeah, I was. So I started home brewing in probably 2005. Yeah, 2005 or so. I was in college. I went to school for microbiology and biology, and in Colorado State in Fort Collins, up north of Denver. And I started home brewing mostly because I was interested in yeast and like I was into like the idea of making beer. It seemed like really cool. I didn't actually enjoy beer that much at the time, but my roommates were willing to fund me making beer, and so I made a few like essentially extract beers, kit beers. The first one I ever did was a Fat Tire clone, and yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's probably awful, but I don't know, made it. And then, you know, I kept that going. And then as I got a real job, I moved to all grain brewing and did that pretty consistently. By 2011 or so, I had met Sarah. We were together, and I was brewing up a storm basically. Like almost every weekend I would brew. And then by the time we got married, there was thoughts that we would open a brewery. I kind of wanted a career change. I was teaching high school science, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I decided I was going to go work at a brewery. Got a few interviews, actually kind of got offered a job at one of them that was pretty far away and paid almost nothing, which is kind of the thing with breweries. And I was like, wow, that's going to suck. And this is coming from a teacher. I didn't make a lot of money to start with, but I was going to make a lot less. And I was like, maybe this, you know, actually I talked to my dad about it, who right after I was born kind of almost took a job at Anheuser-Busch. I was born in St. Louis, and he decided to move to San Diego instead. But yeah, so I, you know, thought, well, maybe I'll go to brewing school instead, and then I can enter at a higher level, and I can be the head brewer at somebody's brewery, or you know, at least a bigger brewery, and make a living wage. And then I found out it was like over a year wait to get into UC Davis, and it was about $30,000, and I would have had to quit my job and go live out there for 6 months or whatever it is. And so I was like, that's cool. And then I was like, wait a minute, if I took that amount of money, especially considering all the costs it would have been, maybe I can just do my own brewery. There's small breweries opening in Denver. And so we kind of took that inspiration and said, well, why don't we just do this? And I mean, we're going to spend the money anyway on brewing school. And I was probably going to get a lot of knowledge about large brewing systems and stuff, but we knew we wanted to start small. Our system's about a 4-barrel system basically. And it's essentially a giant homebrew system, direct fired, and nothing really crazy. It's just bigger. And we knew there'd be, no matter what, a lot of experimentation with new equipment. So we just went for it, went and got a couple partners, and took my retirement and Sarah's retirement and every dollar we had basically, and started a brewery. So,
and here we are. That's pretty cool, man. I mean, there's a lot to be said, I think, for brewing school, but I've kind of maintained that, I think, especially as we transition more and more into neighborhood breweries, home brewing is the future, I think, of even more so sometimes than traditional conventional training, because
it's kind of the past and the future, really. I mean, those started breweries in the early 80s, late 70s. They were all home brewers. They didn't work as commercial brewers or go to brewing school, at least before. Later they hired those people, but I think for the small brewery, you really have to learn your system, and just because you've been to brewing school doesn't mean you.
Yeah. I've just heard a lot.
Are good.
I've heard a lot lately about people keep. I guess as more people get interested, I guess this happens with any industry, but as more people get interested in something and more schools open up and more people are getting formal training, everyone's like, well, let's see pedigree, but I think there's something to be said for just jumping right in and understanding your environment, your surroundings, like you said, getting completely intimate with your system. But all right, so we're at we're thinking about Black Project. You're creating beers kind of behind the scenes. What was kind of the first beer that you brewed that hit and you said, this could maybe drop that seed in the back of your head that goes, this could be a real full-time thing, this Black Project? Was there one?
Well, I mean, we released the first beer about 8 months old. Fortunately, it was a beer that worked out. 100% spontaneous and was ready to sell at 8 months, which was it wasn't a, lambic style production, but it was spontaneously inoculated. And I think we entered that in GAB. Well, first we released it to the public, and people were pretty into the idea, and they're like, that's really cool. And people loved to learn about Coolship and spontaneous fermentation. And then we entered that in GABF. We could only afford to enter one beer in GABF our first year in the competition, and so we did enter that one, our staff and everybody, and you and Sarah were like, you've been doing that? Like, I didn't know what you've been doing, and that this is the beer you want to enter? Like, literally has never been, because we're making this decision before we even sold to the public. And I'm like, how about this? And like, we've got like a porter that's like our best-selling beer. We've got like a bunch of IPAs and stuff that people like really like, and like, why would you? What is this beer? We've never even sold this beer. And I was like, I think we should enter this one in GABF, and we did. And we won a medal. So that was kind of a point where I was like, we should probably do more of this. And luckily, I like it so much that I had been doing quite a bit of brewing that way, even though we had no idea how it was going to turn out. So it wasn't like we waited on that one beer and then went after that. So we just started, as we could afford it, bought more barrels and started doing more Coolship batches. Our original Coolship for the first 3 years of doing this was first 3 winters of doing this was a 2 60-gallon stock pots that we put on our roof. So, I mean, we're a 3-barrel system, so we were getting about a full turn into it, and we covered them with went and got a big nylon bag on Amazon or something and cut it open and made a screen for the top of it just by like literally took binder clips and like just the lip of the stock pots, and then we would have to literally pump it up there every time. So it was like lots of like ropes dangling and like all kinds of like really shady business because we don't have rooftop access except for with a ladder. It's not like we were like going upstairs or anything. So
painting a romantic picture of spontaneous fermentation.
Yeah, it was pretty ghetto, as they say, I guess. But I mean, it worked actually, and I mean, there was definitely times, and I'm sure there's still people out there that think that was an illegitimate way to do it, and I mean, there was a method to why we picked that vessel or why I picked that vessel type, and as far as cooling rate and whatnot. And I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, this is the craziest thing. Like, this isn't legitimate. And like, this isn't, that's not a real Coolship and stuff. And like, I mean, maybe it's not a real Coolship, but it doesn't really matter. What defines a real Coolship, I guess, anyway. And you go to Belgium, and there's quite a few different styles and ways you can do it. And we've actually just this past winter moved on to a bigger one that's copper and 10 barrels and is very much a real Coolship. And it might have been a chip on my shoulder that made me go copper just so I could be more traditional than anybody else that wanted to be traditional and gave me crap about it. Maybe, I don't know. So that was kind of the final progression. That's what allows us to make it all, enough for the taproom now. But I guess we just started making it. We started releasing the first one, and then several months later, we were like, oh, this one's ready now. Let's do this with that one. And then several months later, there's another one. These were all bottle releases. And so people started lining up for them, and people were really into it. And then we're like, can we get to like one bottle release per month and stick to it? And we tried that for like 6 months, and I don't think ever got to one a month. Like, we thought we'd do it, and the beer wasn't ready. And eventually we got to one a month, and we did that for quite a while, although I think we are skipping a public release this June, this month. So we're still not really once a month, but it's all different. We're just saving up for something big in July, and we have a membership now, so they consume a lot of our bottles. So any small releases is consumed by them sometimes. So yeah, I mean, we just sort of worked up to it, and it was a slow growth, and I think that's the way to do it, though. I think it takes a lot of time to get ready for this stuff. So
I love to hear that story about the pots and brew.
Yeah,
it's making do with what you got at the time, but doing it purposefully, and it's something that spurs innovation, because who knows, man? Because if you did that, who knows how many other breweries are attempting to do something similar at their brewery, and we start getting these kind of terroir across the country with people saying, how can I do spontaneous fermentation in my climate, in my city, without a traditional Coolship or space for a traditional Coolship. So I love it. So I guess the thing that I love is the challenge that you've got on your hands of just making everything spontaneous. I mean, I may already know the answer to this, but is every single beer you guys are putting out spending time in the Coolship first? Or is there beers that you've got this kind of culture that you've cultivated, and you're pitching a spontaneous culture into some of the beers?
Yeah, so I would say there's probably like 3 categories of beers we do. We do some beers just on tap, some a little different, but those are isolated wild strains that we've isolated. So they're still not lab yeast, but they're isolated. So we've done an IPA many times, or a series of IPAs with a lab strain that we isolated from across the street from my house here, off of an apple tree. One type, we have no intention to ever bottle or can or anything with those. Those are just an option to have beer on tap. The rest of the stuff is all Coolship caught microbes, is what we call it. So we do, of course, 100% traditional spontaneous, 100% spontaneous, both in the traditional way of a so-called like method-lambic process, or sometimes not, but also still inoculated only in the Coolship, and then directly to a steam clean barrel. And then we have what we call spontaneous soleros, where we took those spontaneous barrels, put them in these big 550-gallon Hoover stainless steel food grade totes that have been modified for brewing, and we use that essentially as a starter, and then put wort on top of it, and let that sort of grow from what was caught in the Coolship and sort of evolve. So some of those have been going for almost 3 years now. And we take about 25% out at a time, maybe up to 50%, and just sort of like keep it evolving. We've never emptied or cleaned them at all, other than when we got them in. So that's one way. We're actually, I mean, if I have my way and we can expand the way we'd like to, we probably will move away from that and sort of phase that out and move towards purely 100% spontaneous production. But I mean, it's a safe bet that anything we make is free of lab yeast being put in it or anything like that. We did use a bottling strain for probably 5 or 6 releases, which would have been 2 years ago or so now. But other than that, we don't add anything. So, yeah.
So we've got these 3 different methods, but so are you using a different method aside from like, the IPAs, things like that, where we've already kind of, so that's a different beast altogether. Are there times during the year where the temperature gets to a certain range where you're pitching more than cool shipping? Are you seeing? Is there any info you can provide on that? Like, is there, or is it pretty consistent in that room where you've got the cool ship where?
Yeah. So in the past, we've never done any cool shipping when it was warm out. So we pretty much stick to an overnight low of maybe up to 50 degrees, but typically about 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit is an overnight low. But since we've got the new Coolship in the Coolship room, we've been using that to cool all of our beers. So we can do the Coolship is essentially set up for a large double batch. We can do 360 gallons to the brim, which if we mess with our system a bit and it's low gravity, we actually boil in our oversized HLT. And so we can do a long boil of low gravity beer and like a 4-hour boil, and then end up still with 180 gallons on what is technically a 4-barrel system. So that's a half fill of the Coolship. We have a divider in the middle of the Coolship, and that in the wintertime, if we were to do only a single batch, we would fill it so it would have the same height and not cool too quickly. But we've been experimenting now in the warmer days with doing a single batch and filling the whole thing half full height-wise, so it's only a 8 or 10 inches, I guess it would be, deep. And so we're experimenting with that. We'll see how it goes. We're not doing anything that is – well, we're actually going to try this, but I don't have any anticipation that it will be good. But we are going to try it. But for the most part, we're not doing anything that we would call 100% spontaneous in the Coolship in the warmer months. So we will Coolship and then go into the totes, into the Solera vessels. But my thinking behind that is it doesn't matter so much what we've caught there because we're putting it into something that has a lot of microbes in it. So it's not as important what we catch. We're just adding to the diversity of that culture. And it's going into a already alcoholic, already acidic environment. So we're not going to have some kind of insane enteric bloom in the first 3 days. That stuff's all knocked out right away. So we're doing that, and that's been working well. But as far as 100% spontaneous in the summer, we're going to try one in like 2 weeks here when I get back, and we're going to try that and see how it goes. We won't know probably for 8 months, but we're going to do it. We'll probably do about 500 gallons of that and see how it goes. But it would be not part of the blend of our actual normal spontaneous beers. Even if it's good, we would do it as a separate product, almost like a summer spontaneous ale, and probably wouldn't do like a 3-year blend of just that or anything. It would just be like a fun thing. It'll be really low gravity and that sort of thing. So.
Sure. Any predictions that you, I guess, through your experience that you would see as a temperature you don't even want to mess with? Like even though you're doing the summer, is there like a temperature in the summer that's just not even worth trying here?
No, I don't know about that. I think we sort of took the Belgian tradition as a starting point, and because they're the only ones who've done spontaneous fermentation of malt beverage for the last 200 years. And so I was like, well, that's a good place to start. Why don't we just try and do it exactly like they do it? And then I varied from that a little bit. And so this summertime thing is kind of definitely a variation from that. They for sure don't do that. And I don't think even historically they would have too much. But, people were using Coolships to make beer until the mid-1700s. It was the only way to cool your wort. And I'm pretty sure they brewed beer in the summer and year-round, in fact, in pretty hot climates. And so it's not like – it's still cool. There's still a drastic difference between even 90 degrees Fahrenheit and 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, it still cools pretty fast. We would like, but, it's not actually that drastic of a difference. The sort of myth out there is more about bad microbes being present in the summer. And I hear that from a lot of Belgian producers, but I don't necessarily know there's a lot of science backing that up. I think it's more about cooling rate, and the wrong cooling rate or too slow of a cooling rate can harbor those bad bacteria better. So yeah, but there's other ways to control that. I'm also, Jester King uses a like an immersion chiller type situation, and I'm gonna build something like that also and try and use that in the summer. We for sure don't get as hot as they do for most of the summer, so that's something where we could even hook it up to maybe some kind of electronic control and get some sort of PID feedback on actual wort temperature and try and emulate a winter cooling rate by using cold water through that instead of just dialing it in by feel. We can kind of do it electronically maybe. That's sort of the kind of stuff I'm experimenting with. Besides doing the traditional, is what if you don't use age tops? What if you change the IBUs? And that's something I've been working on for 4 years now. Is what if I don't follow? And to be fair, a lot of that has been a failure. So, our whole barrel room is essentially full of 90%, 100% Belgian traditional style spontaneous ferments. So, even after all that experimenting, that's I found works pretty well. So, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop from experimenting with it. So,
well, that's what I love every time I talk to you is that there's that time period where kids just ask why. And it's nice to see that you are still in that process where there's these hard and fast rules, and you're like, why? I mean, we tend to lose as we get older that the ability to question or to think outside of what we've been told how to reason on things, right? I mean, we're told you drive a certain way, you do this a certain way, you do that a certain way. You just after a while you start falling into that. And it's tough to kind of click yourself out and get back to the point where why, and keep asking yourself why.
Totally.
That's what's exciting to me about your breweries. A lot of the stuff that you guys do is like, well, why? And I asked you a question about, and it seemed to be somewhat like some of the brewers down at Green Bench were kind of like, oh, this is an interesting question. What about turbid mashing? And your kind of stance that, well, why? Sometimes.
Right.
I thought it was a cool thing to talk about. I know the Milk the Funkers are probably going to watch this. Do you want to talk a little bit about your theory on turbid mash? I mean, we hit on it then. I don't know when that.
Well, I said now in Florida. Oh well, yeah. I mean, I think sort of what is a turbid mash is a thing I tend to ask, and we do 2 different. It's actually kind of evolved now into about 4 different so-called like lambic inspired bases. And I asked myself, what is a turbid mash? And I don't really know the answer to that necessarily, other than to say, well, you can copy what certain Belgian breweries do. But there's probably ways to achieve that end result without doing it the way they do it. And I know for a fact that a lot of those turbid mash are written specifically for the style of systems that they have and had in the past, which were they're taxed based on the size of their mash tun and a lot of stuff. And so there's a lot of weirdness that's like, maybe you don't have to do it that way. And I mean, to be fair, 3 out of 4 of the worts we brew for Coolshipping are following a pretty traditional mash schedule as far as turbid mash. But if the point is to get unfermentables, like really long chains of sugars, starches, really unfermentable stuff, you can do that without pulling wort and boiling it pre-saccharification. So you can do a really short mash at really high temperature, and that's one way we do it is a short single infusion. It's only about 15 minutes, which is essentially how long it takes me to get the lautering set up. And it's 160, usually about 162 degrees, I guess, Fahrenheit, which is like pretty far outside the range of what people think is good for saccharification. Probably not totally denaturing those enzymes. So we're getting some conversion, and I find that wort is as starchy as a turbid mash wort, and in some cases even starchier. And so I have a mash schedule that I call Starch Monster, which is very short single infusion, even a little hotter than that, and it also has a pull pre that single infusion. I guess it's not really single infusion, I guess, but. Anyway, so the point was making a less fermentable wort than even lambic style wort. If the turbid mash yields a pretty unfermentable wort, we can make it less fermentable to an extreme, maybe even. And maybe that's not a good idea. We haven't
I know
packaged that here yet. So. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's important that people question that. I think the lambic tradition is really great, and I really love those beers. I mean, I wouldn't be doing these style of beers if I wasn't really inspired by, and quite frankly, Goose is essentially my favorite style of beer by quite a bit. And yeah, I guess it's just important to question that. They're not really basing things on science, and I think, especially as somebody who has a degree in undergrad degree in science, and just as sort of scientific minded and sort of skeptically minded, I look at that and I think, well, you don't really know why you don't do that. You just somebody told you, so you don't. And that's kind of, I'm just like, well, nobody told me not to, so actually, a lot of people do, especially on Milk to Funk. Sometimes people who don't do it at all themselves. But yeah, I said, well, why not try it? I mean, why not try breaking those rules? And like I said, many times it's not been a good idea, but I wouldn't know for myself why is my brewery not doing this just because some guy 200 years ago in Belgium decided to pass down that they don't do it that way. And it's like, well, it's a whole different reality. So a lot of those things are based is good ideas, but it doesn't mean that every single thing they do is necessary in order to have spontaneous fermentation, or you can only do spontaneous fermentation in a certain area of the world. I don't think there's any basis to that scientifically. So depends on what you're trying to make and what you're trying to have it be like. So
yeah, well, I mean, grains have evolved, equipment's evolved, processes evolved. I mean, there's so much more manipulation available today. Especially controlled manipulation. I mean, and fermentation. So yeah, why not? So speaking of fermentation, I mean, that's kind of the exciting thing for some nerds like us. But I guess once it leaves the Coolship into the barrels, what kind of temperature is that room that you got all the barrels in keep maintained at? And is there?
So that room isn't centrally heated or cooled. Our barrel room is our Coolship room. So in the wintertime, when the windows have been open a lot, it can be pretty cool in there. 50 degrees, 55 degrees. We try to keep it about 60. We have two pretty big space heaters that flip by breakers all the time, and probably should work on upgrading that electrical system. But it for sure will be cold in the morning. The window's been open, and it'll be 50, 55 degrees. It's been better now that more barrels are full. There's a lot more thermal mass in the room, so when you close the window, the temperature goes back up. But we try and keep it, sub 65 in the winter. On the other hand, it's going to be 70 summer, and we're using an evap cooler to try and keep it below 75 if we can. But I think that sort of swing of temperature, I think, is important for the development, and it's part of terroir.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with having a temperature controlled barrel room or less temperature controlled than ours, but the way it works is going to be a certain amount of fingerprint for your brewery. So
are you noticing, is there beers that you've noticed that spend more time in fermentation in the summer, in the hotter months versus cooler months? And are you noticing a change in that fingerprint from maybe beers that spend more time in barrels during different temperature periods?
Sure. I mean, I think the warm part's actually really important. We definitely get the acidity starts to really come up in the summertime when it's warmer, which I guess makes sense. Is bacteria are not very active at sub 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and I mean our beers are essentially always, I think, high enough IBU that they're really PDO soured beers, and probably not lactobacillus, just based on the fact that we have 15 to 25 IBUs in our wort. So it's probably a longer acting PEO and Brettanomyces, but PEO providing the acidity, probably mostly in the summer. A big thing we find is evaporation, because it's very cool year round in Denver. Pretty common for us to be in the wintertime, sub 20% relative humidity. And so we have a humidifier that runs in the winter just so we're not losing tons and tons of beer to the air and drying out our barrels and everything. And then in the summer, the evap cooler is essentially a humidifier. But it's not uncommon for it to have 30% or less relative humidity outside in the summer, and the rest of our space is air conditioned with central AC, which brings it down. So in our tap room, it's pretty much about 20-25% relative humidity year round, and so the barrel cellar has to have a little bit different environment that we're working on maintaining.
Cool. You mentioned you steam clean the barrels prior to pushing. Are you steam cleaning them before pushing wort into them every time, or?
Yeah. So if they were done, if they had a spontaneous ferment in them or whatever they had in them before, unless they're fresh from a winery, which we use them forever, so we're not like buying new ones from wineries right now. And if there's any lees or liquid in it, we rinse that out with water until it's just clear, clean tasting water. And then we siphon that all out, get it all as dry as we can, and then we steam it. It's usually about 15 to 20 minutes, which is hot enough that the inside of the barrel is essentially boiling hot for that entire time because the air is replaced by steam. And the outside, we can get almost to 130 degrees Fahrenheit on the outside, sometimes even hotter. So I feel like we're penetrating pretty deeply into the wood as far as pasteurization temperature. I also understand this is perfect, and then there's always people who are like, "Well, you're not killing everything," and like that's obviously true, but we don't have a giant autoclave to put a barrel in, and there's also people who say that whatever way you autoclave it, you don't have 100% sterility because that's not a thing. There's no such thing as 100% sterility in microbiology, really. So I think we do a really, really good job cleaning and sanitizing the barrels. So that's about
between one batch of your beer to another batch of your beer, I mean, I know there's some people that don't. That they'll just they'll just rack another batch into those barrels without cleaning them out necessarily.
Yeah, we would rinse it out anyway and steam it anyway.
I guess just as a why?
Because we're trying to make beer with the bacteria and yeast that's caught from the air. Admittedly, our Coolship's in our barrel room, and so there's definitely a resident microflora in the room.
Sure.
But fermentation of those barrels, and those barrels were inoculated from the air. We didn't do any funny business of spraying beer around anywhere. We didn't, slosh around any kind of lab cultures in our barrels or anything. There's nothing wrong with any of those things, but we, I really want to try and catch it from the air. So yeah, I mean, it's even if it sometimes sucks because it could be a really good barrel, and you're like, man, I bet if I put wort in here, it'd be really good.
Yeah, that was the root of my question. I was wondering if you had come across too many bad experiences where you're like, well, nah, I'm just gonna go ahead and clean every single time.
Yeah, we've never really done that, but it would be a very different beer. I mean, when you're pitching wort onto a large amount of microbes compared to what you're getting in the Coolship, it's going to be a very different beer. The whole microbial progression of a spontaneous ale is basically gone at that point. And I mean, that's kind of what we do with Solera beers,
right?
Just essentially that. And so it works great, but those beers are not, sort of lambic-ish.
Sure.
So, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna use this as an opportunity to ask you the first question that's on
the first and only.
Yeah, the first and only right now.
There's someone else. Okay, we're good.
Well, Art just commented a little while ago.
The useful question. That's all
right. What do you look for when blending beers? It's a broad question, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a place to start.
There's the whole thing. I think I look mostly for the beer to taste good.
Yeah.
The end result. And I mean, honestly, like if I pull from 20 barrels, there's always going to be, probably 2 of those, maybe 4 of those that are just straight up like, this is not usable. And this is speaking about spontaneous barrels. So it's 10 to 20% where it's just like, well, these are no good at all. And maybe some part of that barrel could be used because sometimes what in a high concentration is really, really not palatable in a very small concentration can be really good. But I'll sit down there and taste all the barrels that are ready or that I want to put in the blend, or that I think are not that I want to put in the blend, but that are potentially could go in it by age and by what beer is in it. And taste those and basically kind of get a quick 3 or 4 words about each one. And honestly, most of those barrels are not all that great on their own. I know last year we sat down, I had a couple of people sitting with me and we were making the blend, and you could tell these guys were all like, oh, we just tasted 30 barrels and none of them were very good. What's he going to do? Because I'm oh, we're probably going to make we're probably going to use most of these barrels. And just right there at the table, I was like, well, I want to actually make a blend here, but we took we got rid of the ones that were awful and then put the ones that were kind of oh, it's kind of weird. I don't know about that. And just haphazardly combine them, what was left in these little tasting glasses into one glass. And right away, I could see their eyes, open up and be like, oh, wow, that's actually really good. That's crazy. Because it's, that's what it's about. And then, of course, going back and saying, okay, well, maybe there's a little too much of this. Let's actually blend it and not just throw them all together. I mean, that's really it, is looking for the right kind of acidity and looking, honestly, I was joking before, but looking for what tastes good to me, I feel is part of it. I've always been the guy who's blending the beers here. And so Black Project beers are what I think tastes good. And it's okay if everybody doesn't agree with me. And, you could come in with my barrels and make a different blend and it wouldn't be Black Project beer.
Right.
It would be different. I might not even like it, but more people might like it. I don't know. But it's kind of if people are expecting a consistency, that the consistency is that I make it that I like it. and I definitely have different, the best or my favorite goose is very different than other people's favorite goose maybe. And I look for different things, but that's making a product that way. And that's the consistency. And then also I think it's, just you always want to try and get the most volume you can of the best tasting beer. And so we're working now with some larger format barrels that tend to be more neutral flavored after time. And so we have a 12 hectoliter punch in now, or really I guess it's a fooder, or I don't know. Anyway, it's a big freaking barrel. It's on its side. So it's, but yeah, that's full. And so it's hopefully that tastes good, but I have a feeling that that's going to be really, actually right now, it is kind of really neutral flavor, really neutral. It's funky, but not that much. And it's not really that sour, and it's not really that anything. But that becomes the palate, and then hopefully the small barrels become the paint on that, and you can get more volume out of it because you're taking these small pieces and putting them in with their, sort of what would be a boring beer, not something we would sell, but all the small pieces together can make that really exciting. So,
is there when you sit down to start blending a beer, is the idea? Do you have an idea in mind of what you want something to represent at first, or does that kind of evolve as you start tasting through what's kind of ready?
Yeah. So this year we're actually going to take our spontaneous stuff and based on 2 different recipes that we've been doing, make essentially 2 different method goose style beers, so to speak. If that term's even going to be a term, I don't know. But anyway, 2 different people know what I mean. Anyway. Anyway, so we're going to do 2 different ones. One of which is all Colorado malt and Colorado grown wheat. And actually Colorado hops, about 75% aged and 25% unaged Colorado hops, which is historically lambic was not always 100% aged hops. And then the other one will be a modern lambic style, continental European hops, continental European malt, continental European wheat, and a little more traditional turbid mash schedule on that. And they're both turbid mash, but that one's more traditional maybe. And so I think we're going to make 2. And so I have different ideas in mind. If one's going to be kind of like the one we did last year, a representation of Black Project in Colorado and exactly how I feel like it should be, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to describe. And then the European one will be more trying to make it so that it tastes more like traditional goose. And so that's what I'll be looking for, traditional goose lambic flavors. Even though that might not be what I would prefer in the first one, that's what the second one will be about. So that's how we can have 2 different beers it'll be. inoculated in the same place, but just looking for different flavors.
Okay, so there is somewhat of an approach. It's not just haphazardly. This might taste good together. This might taste good together.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot for sure. But yeah.
Do you kind of take that approach when you're even just kind of formulating? Maybe you want different beginning products, a different wort right from the start. I mean, are you taking kind of like a year from now? I'd love to have a beer that I can blend. That's going to taste X, Y, and Z. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think to an extent, I've sort of started this year moving towards, like I said, doing essentially 4 different recipes, almost like, I mean, going to Belgium and seeing that, I mean, and I guess I knew this, but a lot of those lambic producers are not brewing anything at all. Mm-hmm. They're buying wort from other lambic brewers. And so unfortunately, we don't have like, half a dozen lambic or even Coolship producers within 20 miles of us like they do. So I can't do that. So I said, well, I can make 4 different versions myself, and I can kind of make, even though the Coolship is in the same location, I can have 4 different processes, because I don't know if the Coolship location within Belgium makes that drastic of a difference in flavor. Maybe it does, but more of it I think is process differences. And hearing blenders talk about, oh, that one, I got to be careful with that guy because I buy his wort and it's too hoppy, and I buy this guy's wort and you can tell like it attenuates way farther. It dries out way more. I'm like, well, those are not necessarily Coolship things, almost certainly. They're process things, right? So I mix the process up, and I have 4 different producers that I am using to make a blend, which is kind of fun. And then I think this next season, there's 2, maybe there'll be more by next season, but two breweries that are using Coolships on a reasonably large scale, at least a couple batches a year. I don't think they've ever released. Maybe they have, but so True Brewing in Denver has used a mash tun dairy tank type thing as a Coolship and done a few batches to the Method Goose, Method Lambic requirements this past winter. And our mutual friend Brewing, which is where I brewed my first test batches for Former Future, actually. They're also using the same sort of idea and doing some Coolship beers. And so I've talked to those guys, and I'm excited this year to hopefully do a little bit of a wort swap where we're all actually right about 10 barrel size. It'll take me 2 batches to do it, but whatever. So we can say, hey, you come pick up my wort out of my Coolship and bring with you from the night before. And so I'm excited to actually get that in my barrels. Yes. I'm actually truly like a lambic blender would have in Belgium. I don't know what their process is, to be honest. And I care, but it doesn't matter to me because it's blending stock. And,
that's really cool.
Maybe I'll find something beautiful that goes with it, and that's kind of neat. So I'm excited for that. But that's obviously going to be really
that's an incredibly cool idea, man. And that's like that kind of collaboration doesn't happen in any other industry but this one.
And I don't even know that it would be necessarily, and very much could be, but I don't even know that it would be a collaboration. It's just that we're all doing these beers, and we all would like inoculation variation and process variation because it helps blending. So it may not ever be that there's a collaboration where you're like, oh, this is this thing they did together. It's like some of that beer might always just be part of my beer.
Yeah.
Until it's gone. If we keep doing it, it might just always be part of it.
That's cool.
Pierre Tilcan is buying beer or wort from Cantillon and from Frank Bone or wherever, and there's differences in that. It's not really a collaboration, so to speak. He's making the beer, but yeah, I think that could be really fun to do. So
that's incredibly cool. Yeah. What about? I guess so. We're talking about trying to get through as much as possible without taking 15 hours, but. Some of the fruited beers that I've been able to try from you guys are they're absolutely gorgeous. I mean, is there a general approach you take to fruiting beer? I mean, I know that you're going to vary a bit depending on how jammy you want it or how. I mean, I know there's going to be variation in that regard, but is there a general approach that you take to fruiting beer? I mean, I think it's kind of something that everyone's starting to play with now. More so.
Yeah. I mean, So we've experimented both with. We don't use any concentrates or extracts. We do use Oregon Fruit Products puree. Basically learned about them from the Rare Barrel, and who uses their stuff a lot. It's very good. It's whole fruit, and it's pretty readily available. So we do some beers with that, especially like we have a beer series on tap called Shadow Factory, which is always different. We make it year round. Like I don't have any way of storing or processing Colorado fruit. And I think when we use local fruit, what's important to me is that it tastes like the fruit, like it's true to style, which I think people don't realize, but like probably because most people shop in a grocery store, as do I. I'm not trying to be superior about that, but if you buy a cherry or what, it's not a great example, but a raspberry, people have an idea in their brain of what raspberry should taste like. They have had raspberry starburst or whatever, and like it's all sort of like the same flavor. But wild raspberries can have a lot of different flavors, and different farms and different sub varieties can have a lot of different flavors that people don't think of as raspberry. And so I think you have to be careful using whole fruit not to do that, because people don't make the synaptic connection in their brain then that it's raspberry, and so they're not even picking up the fruit that they could because it's so foreign to them. Or some of those flavors are like, well, it's more like wine grape than raspberry, and so they're like, I don't get as much fruit, and it's like it might be more fruity, but it's a different kind. That's a great thing about Oregon fruit is they're always really true to fruit. But I mean, for our spontaneous stuff, we make a beer called Cygnus, which we essentially is a method lambic style beer with fruit, 1 and 2 year blend. And so we're using Colorado fruit for that, whole fruit. And we make a beer called Stargate, which is the Colorado whole fruit thing in spirit barrels. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what what else to say about it. Yeah, I think well, I guess a tip would be, I think selecting the base beer for it is really important. So I'm always looking for a beer that is lower in acidity and letting the fruit acidity shine through, especially for something like berries or even tart cherries. Letting the fruit acidity shine through makes it taste more like the fruit to me than having just acid on top of acid. And you don't. So much of eating a raspberry or cherry, tart cherry, is the acidity. And if that's covered up by a bunch of lactic acid from the beer, it doesn't taste as much like a fruit as it could. So,
makes sense. Is there any general stance you take on pound per gallon? Is it your fingerprint based on what you want from that beer?
Yeah, it depends. So for the Cygnus stuff, like for cherries, we'll do pounds per gallon of vessel capacity. So it's different than pounds per gallon of beer. And I finally put my foot down. I was like, this is how we're measuring it, and I don't really care. So, in a 100-gallon tank, you can have 300 pounds of cherries, but you won't have 100 gallons of beer then. So we would call that 3 pounds per gallon, which is a pretty strong amount. Not normally what we do for our, like, creek style beer. We're normally about 2 to 2.5 pounds per gallon of vessel capacity, which ends up being actually higher amount pounds per gallon of beer, right? Because the berries take up some room in the vessel. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot per gallon.
Yeah. So, I mean, traditional creek is probably between 1.5 to up to a little over 2. Yeah. So.
Cool. I got another question from James. Any tips on dry hopping sour beer?
Yeah. Again, I think acidity you have to look for a certain type of, assuming we're talking about sort of modern American hops, you're looking for a certain type of acidity and a certain type of yeast character that complements that hop. So that's what we always look for. We make a beer called Jump Seat and a beer called Ejector. And so that's a blend of another beer that would normally be called Dreamland, but we're taking from multiple vessels. And I'm always looking for a little bit higher acidity, actually, and a more fruity character just to go with the hops, but not so much fruity that it covers them up. And then the other big, huge thing, and it's many dry hop sours I've had commercially, and I've had it the first time we did that beer, is tetrahydropyridine, which is I think it's something about a Brettanomyces breakdown of fatty acids in the presence of oxygen. And for some reason, to me, hops will cause that to come out like nobody's business. And I'm not really sure why it is. Because maybe because you're adding oxygen, it's not really adding any fermentation at the same time. Whereas like you add fruit, you're probably adding more oxygen, but they're at least fermenting, so it's going to drive it off or not to drive the oxygen off right away or have it be consumed. So yeah, I mean, I think out of every commercial dry hopped, especially when you're talking about a non-kettle soured beer, so a beer that's dry hopped when it's truly in a mixed culture state, that PHP comes up in a lot of commercial examples I have. It's something I strive like really hard not to have in those beers, and it's tough though. It's I mean, I'm purging the tank for probably like half a day, like with CO2, to make sure that there's no oxygen. The hops are in there already; they're being purged essentially with it, and the beer's being pulled gently from the bottom of the tank into the hops instead of like dumping the hops in. The first time we did that beer, it was so much THP.
Oh Jesus!
It was too much for me. It wasn't so much. I feel like that it was like not more than a lot of other ones.
It's a really off-putting flavor compound. I mean, it's
kind of like, I mean, I think a lot of people confuse it with diacetyl. I think, and to me, it's more like soggy cereal.
Yeah.
But it's like I get it so frequently in dry hop sour blonde ales. From you know, I don't know. It can be off-putting and definitely in higher amounts. It starts to get really weird, but the small amount, I was like, man, is that diacetyl? It just won't go away, and everything, you know. And actually, Ben Knutson, who at the time was working at AC Golden, making sour beers, his boss went on to be pretty famous. He came by my booth and said, I said, can I send this to you? You guys can do a VDK test on it for diacetyl. I was like, it's been in the bottle for a long time. And he goes, no. He's like, you know what this is? And I was like, I have no idea. And he's like, it's THP. And then we ended up talking about it a lot. I don't even know if the mechanism is really fully understood, but I know oxygen's involved. I know bread's involved. Yeah. And so that can make dry hopping kind of a bad combination.
So I was going to ask you, the process would really be purge. I mean, lots of.
That's my process for it. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
That's a good. Hey, that's helpful. I want to talk to you a little bit. You've been on the forefront with our buddy Jeff over there in Austin. Pretty vocal on a lot of the AB action lately.
Sure.
The Wicked Weed thing, of course, kind of took a lot of people by surprise. Maybe not. Maybe some people maybe not so much by surprise, but more. It kind of hurt because Wicked Weed was kind of one of us type of thing for a lot of people. But this new rate beer thing, that's the more intriguing one to me.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, there's a lot of danger can come from it, I guess, but what are your biggest concerns with it? I mean, is there a consensus amongst a lot of craft brewers with regard to how they feel about this, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've heard all kinds of things, and I think people get really conspiratorial about it. And to be fair, I probably stoked that flame a little bit with conspiracy type theories, and I probably am about to in a minute. More, but I think, you know, man, like, it's not it. If any brewery bought into a rating site, I wouldn't be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be less okay with it if it went 9 months before it came out. It doesn't matter who it is. The fact that it's AB just makes it more insidious because they are bad juju in a lot of other ways. But it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, you know, if you know, we're talking about Jester King. If Jester King bought out Rate Beer or bought a percentage ownership in Rate Beer, I'd be like, what the hell? It's supposed to be an independent site.
Right. It reeks.
Say all they want, like, well, it's supposed to be independent. And I'm like, yeah, but why would you take money from a brewery then? Like, there's other places to get funding. And he even, Joe Tucker, by his own admission, said a lot of people were interested in investing, and this was the best choice for us. And I'm like, well, who were the other people? And they probably didn't own breweries, so that would have made anything associated with a brewery should have been disqualified, in my opinion.
Well, the best choice for us usually means most money.
Well, that's probably true. I mean, and I can't fault somebody for doing that. I mean, like I said, I don't fault Walt and Luke and their partners at Wicked Weed for selling out. I mean, we just came out, that was dollars. That's that's like you don't have to work again. Your kids don't have to work.
Your kids probably don't have to work.
Yeah, as I'm saying, maybe your grandkids don't have to work like that. If you handle that well, like you can live well without working. And I can't fault anybody for doing that. And if somebody put $800 million or even a lot less than that in front of my face, I would take it in a heartbeat. But I would realize I was selling out, and I would realize that like it's going to hurt the brand that I built. And so, luckily, I'm in nowhere near of a big enough brewery to ever be a target, let alone for enough money that it would be worthwhile that I wouldn't have to work again. I'd be like, well, that's a nice severance. I guess I could take a year off probably or something. But anyway,
how many gallons? How many barrels per year are you guys producing right now?
We'll probably do. Our goal is to do 400 this year.
Can you imagine 800 million for 400 barrels of beer?
Ever good valuation. Like I said, I'd take it. I don't know, man.
If you didn't take it, I would fly there just to hit you over the head, man.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, anywhere close to that. I'll do it for half. $100 million for 100 barrels. Anyway, and our goal is maybe to make 1,500 barrels a year, probably more like 1,000 barrels a year. Like that's our kind of like end goal. I don't even see us hitting 2,000 barrels a year. I just don't have the desire to try to scale the way we want to make beer to that level. It's probably not possible. Anyway, Rate Beer. Not only was it a brewery investing in a rating site, which seemed shady to me, it was hidden for 9 months, which seems super shady. And I think then this is where you get into the conspiracy theories and people are like, oh, AB is going to influence their ratings. Be like, oh, suddenly Budweiser is going to be rated so highly or something. And I'm like, I actually don't think the community would allow that, and I don't think they're dumb enough to try that. I think that the ratings will actually remain potentially non-biased, but that doesn't mean it's a site I want to support, because supporting that site means my money goes to AB, who does a lot of other stuff against craft beer.
Right.
And I think the members of that community, I'm not really a member of that community, but I've talked to many of them, and if I was a member of that community, many of them did not like AB for a long time for their practices in the craft beer world. And founder took this community that he was a part of and sold it to AB and then hid it from them for 9 months. So it would be hard to convince me to stay a part of that community and not jump to something else, even though I've invested a lot of my time in it. I invested all this time, and the founder sells me out, essentially. To the enemy. He sells me out to the enemy, not just to somebody. I think everybody was okay with him getting some money. And I think here's the concern I have, and I have heard this from a few people now. The way I think it will be used, and this is my conspiracy theory, is it's not about harvesting, because honestly, I don't think AB gives a shit about ratings, clearly. And honestly, I don't think most brewers care that much about ratings in those sites. But it's not going to be about that. It's not about influencing ratings. The user data you could already purchase that through an API with Rate Beer. But what I'm interested in seeing is online advertising. And when you go look at, for example, we make a sour red called, our sour red with cherries called Elsewhere, or called Ramjet. And if you go and you are at the liquor store and you look up Ramjet sorry, my screensaver just came on. Sorry. You look up. Oh crap! I can't see anything right now, so I don't know if you can see me.
I can see you.
Okay, good. Okay, let's keep touching the mouths every once in a while. Okay, so okay, whatever. You go look up a cherry sour made by an independent craft brewery on Rate Beer when you're at the liquor store. You're not even a Rate Beer member. but you just go to the website. Many people do that. And then you've got a cookie in your browser. I don't understand the technical details and shit, so it's probably wrong. But anyway, somehow they know you looked up, craft brewery XYZ's cherry sour. And then, you start noticing after you check the rating on that, your Facebook, you start seeing ads for AB InBev cherry sour. You start seeing ads on Facebook, and ads targeted next time you go back to rate beer. They say, I think you like this beer. Maybe you like AB's cherry beer. And those things can follow you around. They can say, okay, this user, we're noticing users that they look for sour beers. They're tending to go for cherry sours more than raspberry. And they can take that data and they can say, and you know what else? They also tend to go to this other site. They tend to jump to this other beer forum site or something, advertising there at that site potentially. And so I think it could be a lot about targeting advertising for people who aren't even users, registered users of the site, just random Joe Schmoes who probably outnumber the users and the raters by 100 to 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an issue, and it's there's a lot more they can control too. I mean, by using that data. I mean, they got the money to control how much produce you can actually get inside your door potentially. I mean, they could.
That's for sure. Yeah.
So that's dangerous too, because you make a great cherry sour or raspberry. We keep using those two, and all of a sudden AB is like, well, everybody seems to be looking up these. What if we just buy this year's crop? And they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, somebody was telling me that the entire, the estimated value of all of the entire American hop market essentially is about $500 million, or something like that.
Yeah.
Which seems, but maybe not. And
they can do it.
I mean, if they really wanted to make a spend, I'm sure they could buy a vast majority of hop producers in the United States.
Yeah.
And and this is not they did this following Prohibition, and actually a little bit before Prohibition. They started buying barley growers and farms, and you go to Idaho now and you see tons and tons of fields of barley, and that's all going to go to AB Beers, and they own the farms, and you cannot buy that barley. I cannot buy that barley.
South African hops now.
Right, and so what if they do that with hops? Yeah, and the South African hops was the big thing where it was like, I think a lot of people were like, oh,
yeah,
that was a thing. That was the kind of a thing they acquired through their Molson Coors thing. Yeah, I mean, it could be if they wanted to strong arm. They're buying homebrew stores and stuff, online homebrew stores. Like, that's weird to me.
Yeah.
It's this weird everything beer related.
Well, it's probably the Disney effect, I think. It's like the earlier you start kids on Mickey Mouse, the more they make you take them to Disney and spend
totally, yeah,
$500 a night for a cheap hotel.
Right.
It's the same thing. If I get these people when they come into the sport, which is kit brewing now, and all of a sudden everything's AB, 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 AB. It's somewhat of it's the same similar effect.
Yeah, I think it's it's almost, you could see a situation in 10 or 15 years where, I go to the liquor store and it's all AB products there, and I want a home brew and I want to go buy homebrew equipment. The largest ones are AB owned, and I go rate a beer, and that's on the largest rating site is AB owned, which is not by far the largest rating site now, but it could be, I'm sure, down the road. And it's like, what else is it going to be? I don't know. I mean, if hops for my homebrew and they're all from an AB farm, and I buy the grain is from an AB farm, and it's like they could pretty easily control the entire pipeline.
Yeah.
At least to the point where it would be very, very difficult and expensive to get into the game.
Yeah.
As a competitor. So.
Yeah, I mean and you're starting to see it too, just in retail also. I mean, I know that the grocery store chains and down here in South Florida, I've noticed the more craft stuff has started kind of made its way off of the main cooled beer section. So it's just like end cap only, or not even that much end caps anymore. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I guess it's kind of good sitting where you're sitting, and hopefully one day where I'm sitting, where we're just relying on taproom sales for those.
Right. Yeah, totally. Sell direct to the customer.
Yeah. So, All right. Any parting words, my friend? I think that we have taken up an hour and 10 minutes of your time.
Oh, no problem. My parting words, I tend to, if someone gives me the chance to say this, I tend to say this. And it's death to, no, wait, no, it's not it. It is that, I'll just say it. Time does not respect that which is done without him.
There you go. Let's end it right there. That's it. Okay, you guys didn't write any more questions, so.
Guys, milk the funk.
All right, then we're done on that.
All of them are still at work. I guess they're leaving work. Anyway, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.